Okay. Okay, first of all, tell everybody who you are and some of your athletic background.
Do you talk to you or talk to them?
You could talk to them.
Well, what style is this going to be?
I mean, it's not that hard. You are Christian Lucero. He's placed 18th in the 2015 CrossFit Games.
16.
2016 CrossFit Games? Okay.
Gosh, do you even do any research on the people you're bringing on?
And you've competed in weightlifting competitions, is that correct?
This is correct.
Okay.
This is true.
Okay, so this interview
Numerous
is
weightlifting competitions. Current 6x6 lifter.
Okay. And you have a lot of experience.
Non-registered USAW lifter.
But you have some experience because of...
CrossFit enthusiast.
Not because of CrossFit, because of who you're married to.
Professional sharpshooter.
I should have known that this was not going to go as easily as I thought it was.
Amateur knitter.
Okay, I'm saying you have experience within the weightlifting community because of me. What is your...
Because of you.
Yeah, what is your viewpoint on USA Weightlifting because of that unique relationship that you have in the community?
Well, it's given me a chance to see like the background of behind the scenes of USA Weightlifting. I've gotten to be in the back at some of the biggest meets, in the country and in the world for weightlifting, and I've gotten to kind of have that secondhand experience of you competing at such a high level for so long. That just gives me a better understanding of really what goes on and the ins and outs and what it really takes to be at the top and where you are and where these other people in the country are at, and just kind of gives me a greater appreciation for the sport and for the people that are doing it.
Do you think that gives you a unique perspective in your own training for the CrossFit Games? Do you think that some of the experiences that you've learned through USA Weightlifting has helped you in your athletic development?
Yeah, just because I get to see what you and other people go through at the top, and anytime you can have that vision and see that anybody at the top of whatever sport it is, whether it was, whether you were doing a different sport, I think just seeing somebody dedicate their life and their time and their body to what they do 100% and do that is going to give me a unique perspective and a unique outlook and understand a little bit more the full magnitude of everything. So it just kind of reinforces, the severity and the impact of everything that you're doing and how it affects, how your day-to-day training and your day-to-day mindset and nutrition and all of that stuff kind of affects how you compete and how you perform, and just kind of the things that work, the things that don't, and just kind of gives me the ability to see that without testing it on myself.
So obviously the warm-ups and things like that are super different in weightlifting versus in CrossFit, just because of your workouts aren't necessarily like 3 attempts perfectly timed out on a platform. How do you warm up for weightlifting in a CrossFit competition? That's different than how I would maybe warm up. Like, how do you approach that?
How is my warm up different than your warm up?
Well, not like obviously it's going to be different, but like what kind of jumps that you take that are different than like another male weightlifter to warm up to a max attempt, for example? Like, do you take bigger jumps?
Usually I take bigger jumps. Just my style is my coach has me wants me used to bigger jumps and being able to take those bigger jumps. So if we were ever in the middle of a competition that we needed to take attempts and lifts, we were more comfortable with those bigger jumps. And so, but that's just my style, you know. The other CrossFitters have their own style. Everyone has their own style. And even weightlifters have their own style.
Then how do you approach that mentally differently, knowing that those are bigger jumps that you might not have attempted in the past? Or
well, I practice them in the gym, so that way when it comes to the competition time, I'm ready and comfortable with them.
Do you do anything like mentally to prepare yourself, or do you just you're like, okay, this is how it's gonna go, I'm just gonna do it and don't think about the number?
Yeah. Yeah, usually it takes a little bit of time in the gym before I'm really consistent with depending on what jump it is. Usually if we have a new jump, it'll take me, you know, a few weeks in the gym of consistently getting it before I'm more and more, you know, just get more and more confident as I hit it more often and get more familiar with it. And it's more so about like how much effort I need to give on the lift and how I'm gonna feel it, how the lift's gonna feel, and knowing that and expecting that, and so that way I can, you know, hit the lift. Because a lot of the times those bigger jumps, you might miss them because you're not expecting it to feel a certain way, or you're not giving the right amount of effort you should be giving, and those little jumps kind of help you feel it out and go, you know, just kind of step by step. It kind of takes you, they're nicer jumps, so they're easier to like be like, all right, I'm going to give just a little bit more on this one, I'm going to give just a little bit more on this next one, and you kind of feel the weight gradually increasing. Whereas if you take bigger jumps, you're not going to feel that as much. You're going to feel like, oh, that one was really easy, and then your next one might be like, oh gosh, I need to try a lot harder on that one to make it as crisp. So
what kind of cues do you give yourself to make that happen, to be able to make those lifts with more effort, etc.? Like, do you say something specific? Do you know, like, there's certain things that you're working on with your technique that you really want to see happen in that lift? Or
I think my cues stay the same throughout my whole session. I have different things that I'm working on and that I'm cueing myself that will stay consistent throughout the whole lifting session. Just the intensity and the amount of effort I need to give with those cues changes.
What are the cues? Do you mind me asking?
No, it's very secret. Right now, my biggest cue for like my snatch is staying upright in my pull. So when I, you know, drive and extend with my legs, getting as tall as I can. That keeps, you know, the bar close to me and keeps me from jumping back as much. And then my other cue with my snatch is, it's not really a cue that I tell myself, but in the warm up, it's something that I kind of tell my body with my movement is in my catch, you know, keeping my wrist strong in my catch. So that's my those are my two for snatches. And then for clean and jerk, same thing on my drive up on the clean is, you know, getting nice and tall, keeping that bar close, and then when I turn over in the catch, having good wrist position. For me, like, the wrist position really affects where I catch overhead. It really affects where I catch in my front rack. If I've got like lazy wrists, it allows my body to be a little bit less vertical in the catch on both the snatch and the clean. So if my wrists are strong, then I'm usually going to make the lift.
So coaches note Christian's wrists are over flexible. So if he's not, they are. So if he's not more aware of his positioning, the bar can go too far back so that he doesn't have complete control with all of his joints underneath his body. So you and I have talked about this a lot, just like personally, but why don't you tell the people from Brute kind of the importance you think of technique within CrossFit? Because we know that it doesn't need to be as precise as, say, my 1 rep max and my technique and the emphasis that I put on my technique every single day. But you're unique in the fact that most CrossFitters don't feel like it's as important, but why don't you go ahead and tell them your philosophy on that?
I feel like it's just as important. You're just going to see it in different ways. Like, if a weightlifter doesn't have the proper technique on a 1 rep, you know, on their lifting days when they're going heavier, they're just going to miss the lift usually. sometimes they might make it, and they might be able to save it, but usually at those heavier weights, when you're going for, close to your max or a new PR, your technique is going to have to be spot on, especially at your body weight. And someone at your level, you're lifting so much comparative to your body weight that 1 degree off in your technique is going to mean the difference between a make or a miss, and that can be very detrimental to your performance, your past training, the stipend you might get for the next so ever months. Could also mean the difference between making a team or not making a team, or medaling or not medaling. So that's the kind of difference for you guys in the technique. For us, the technique, one missed technique isn't really going to make or break us. We do have 1 rep maxes that it will mean we wouldn't have made that lift, but it's not going to be as detrimental in that, but that you're going to carry that over across multiple reps and multiple sets. In CrossFit, you're going to be doing these big numbers of movements, and if you're doing 100 overhead squats and your technique is a little bit off every single time, that overhead squat's going to get a whole lot heavier and feel a whole lot worse, and you're going to not be able to do it as fast. You're not going to be able to do it as crisp with the same amount of
you're doing
efficiency. So you're gonna obviously have a slower time. So
and you're doing it under fatigue, so you have to be more precise in order to make it in general. Where it might not be the same sort of pressure because you have so many different workouts that you're doing.
Right.
But if you're not able to have that good movement pattern, then you're not going to be able to do that movement pattern under fatigue, and you're likely not going to be able to hit a weight that you probably could hit on a normal day a little bit fresher. So with all of that technique that you work on, how do you just give yourself cues every day while you're doing the exercises, or do you meditate and do visualization? Do you have any, rituals like that you do for your
usually for like any of the movements I'm going to be doing in a workout, there's cues, and you kind of know where your body is going to break down and where you're going to want to try to find rest, and you got to balance and manage that, like finding rest in the movement so you can keep working through it and working through the pain, but also not finding the rest with poor movement, or finding the rest with sloppy movement, because then it's going to add up. It's going to be harder eventually. And so just for every movement, I have different cues on where I know the movement's going to start to break down. Like, in front squats, I know that if we have a lot of heavy front squats, I know that my hips are going to be wanting to push back as I get more tired, and they're not going to want to stay under me as long, which is going to get me out of the bottom faster, but it's also going to mean I'm going to have to give a little bit more effort at the top to finish the rep. So that's something that I'll know going in, and I'll make sure I'm aware of to cue myself as I'm going through the movement. As I start to feel it start to break down, I can cue myself.
So you just kind of rely based on how you're feeling, because you know your body so well. You don't necessarily like sit down before you do the lift and visualize it in your mind happening and then going out and trying to mimic that visualization. It's just kind of like in the moment, you're feeling that your hips are coming up too soon, and then you have to react to it based on that and try to fix it.
Yeah, well, it's a combination, because as I'm feeling it, I'm also visualizing what's happening with the movement. So it's a combination of the two, because I'm feeling that feedback, and I can visually see like where I am in space, or I can mentally see where I am in space and have that visualization of where I need to be versus where I am, and then kind of visualize what it needs to be like on the next rep, and then so on and so forth.
So I notice in watching the CrossFit Games and regionals and going to stuff with you that a lot of CrossFitters train in both weightlifting shoes and in regular sneakers without having a brand favorite attached to that. What do you think about the difference? Like, what do you feel differently when you're lifting in both? How do you approach training? Do you try to have a balance of training in both types, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, when I'm weightlifting, I put weightlifting shoes on, and when I'm doing stuff more for that has multiple aspects that are not just purely weightlifting. I'll use, like a cross training shoe.
What do you think the importance of lifting and the weightlifting shoes is, and how does it benefit you more?
Well, you're more stable side to side. There's that solid heel, so it keeps you from, the cushion in the shoe giving either way, which can be a big deal at heavy weights. It can mean, a miss or a make in the lift sometimes, and can also mean like, you might be, slowly injuring yourself, or, you might have something happen where you do injure yourself because you don't have that stability. So there's that aspect. Also, it elevates your heel, so you're going to be able to get a much more upright vertical torso, which is how the lifts, should be done. They have weightlifting shoes for a reason, so they're not like obsolete. The best weightlifters in the world at the Olympics and World Championships all wear weightlifting shoes. Like there's not one that doesn't. So, that tells you something that they do what they're supposed to do. And help you in weightlifting. Yeah,
it definitely helps with the angles of your body and hitting the most efficient bar path. Yeah, they're good. I was just curious because CrossFitters don't always wear them, so I was just wondering, like, your perspective.
I think it's more so because, you want to understand how to lift in them and understand how to use that tool, but also not rely on it. So just like anything else in CrossFit, you need to understand how to use the tools that you're given to better your performance without having to rely on them, because you never know when you're not going to be able to use them.
Yeah, to me that goes back to the self-awareness too, because if you were able to lift efficiently in your weightlifting shoes, but then in a workout you might not necessarily have the option to go run and put your shoes on, that you have to be able to adjust and be able to make your lifts no matter what, if you have them or not. And that goes with mobility and rhythm in your movements, and like the awareness in your pulse, so that I don't have that extra heel, so I'm back a lot further. So how do I, make this lift perfectly without having that extra added heel?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like with some people that have mobility issues, the shoes can help a lot with, your positions and achieving better positions faster, because you don't have to necessarily change your mobility or make those big improvements on your mobility to get those positions. But on someone that already has good mobility, sometimes it can be harder because you're adding a wider range of where their body can move. So you're taking somebody that already has good mobility in shoes and can snatch and clean and jerk fine.
Right.
But you're adding this heel, which allows them a much wider degree of variation in the torso and in every aspect of the lift. So it's kind of like you're giving them a tool that kind of opens what they can do with the bar.
Yeah.
So it can kind of be like, oh, I lift better without shoes. Like this mook over here, Cody Anderson, he likes lifting without shoes, and he lifted a long time without shoes. And then when you do put him in shoes, he might feel weird because he can now achieve a more upright torso more easily, or it can mean that like he has, more range of motion in different positions. So that can kind of be counterintuitive or counterproductive at first until they understand how to utilize that better.
So if you had an athlete that was asking you for advice, and they were asking, I'm transitioning from CrossFit into weightlifting. I have spent my entire career not lifting in weightlifting shoes or using a belt or any of those things, but I see all of the weightlifters at world championships and on Instagram videos wearing all of those tools. Should I start using them? What would be your advice to that athlete?
Yeah, I mean, like with anything, you shouldn't just jump in 100%. I would say, you start wearing them, when you're doing weightlifting specific work, and get used to them more and more. But if this is someone going from CrossFit to weightlifting, yeah, so get more and more work with them. Obviously, when you're doing your weightlifting sessions, wear them and get used to the feeling of them. But if you're doing like bar warm-ups and you're doing like different lighter sets, bar work, you can obviously wear, your tennies or your cross training shoes or whatever.
Tennies.
Your tennies.
Your nummies.
And yeah, so get used to wearing them when you're doing your weightlifting, but also it's good to keep that flexibility and body awareness of being able to lift without them. You know, maybe every day you warm up and you do your bar warm-ups and your other type of warm-ups with your, you know, flat shoes on, and then you switch to your weightlifting shoes on your first set or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Just to ease into it, so you're not putting your body in positions that it's not used to being in, under tension, under stress, and then, you know, making yourself at higher risk for an injury because you're just not used to it, and then adding all of that load and that heavy stress of training. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And also understanding that they are new positions, so you might have been able to snatch, you know, 95 as a female or something in regular tennis shoes, but then when you put your shoes on, you know, you've maxed out a few times and all you've been able to hit is like 85, but that's, you know, because the positions are new. You've added a whole new dimension of the lift, so you over time you're going to get used to that, and you are going to end up being able to hit heavier numbers. It just might not come right away, right off the bat, so you have to kind of stick with it and be understanding and patient with that.
That's confusing because someone told me that putting weightlifting shoes on would add 10 kilos to my snatch.
It will eventually.
I'm just kidding.
It might eventually. It's not for sure going to, but it'll give you a better chance.
So let's kind of veer back into the CrossFit questions. So Michael Cazu asked me a question to ask you, and I wanted to point out that it was Michael Cazu's question because it's a very flattering question to you, and not that I wouldn't compliment you on this, but it's just funnier knowing. I
wouldn't compliment you.
It's just funnier knowing.
Let this be known, it's not my question.
So he was wondering how...
From a secret admirer.
Yeah, how do you continue to stay so strong in the Olympic lifts while still being one of the best conditioned athletes within your sport of CrossFit? Like, how do you approach that? Is it in your program that you're focusing a lot on both aspects, or is it, you think, a natural gift?
I think that it has a lot to do with the training and how you're training and what style you're training in. And so if you're training in both styles equally, and you know, that's something my coach does. He programs everything out and has a plan for everything. So I kind of just trust that and go 100% into that. And he has a background in weightlifting, and that's kind of where his fitness and like journey began, was in weightlifting. That's where he started his training. And so he programs a lot of things like weightlifters. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of got those built in, but he also has a really wide base of knowledge in, you know, the cardiorespiratory aspect of the training. So it just is a combination of mixing a good amount of both in there and not being afraid to do that. And you know, some people shy away from too much of one or the other, because you know, it is a lot of work, but you know, you're going to be doing a lot of work at the games, you're going to be doing a lot of work at any competition that you go into, so, and it's going to be that wide variety, so you have to be good at the ends and then the middles, and it takes a lot of training, so you just got to be able to recover from it.
So if another athlete came and told you that they were trying to pursue both their weightlifting career and their CrossFit career, but they were nervous about balancing the two, what would be your advice to that athlete?
I mean, it's definitely one of those things you have to choose one or the other. I think at the highest level of anything you do, just like any professional sport, you know, weightlifting, CrossFit, they're both getting such a big pull of athletes in there. Yeah, to be at the best of anything or be at the top of anything, you need to choose what sport you want to commit to. And these sports aren't, you know, fringe sports anymore. They're legit, and the people competing in them are legit. And they're, you know, if you're kind of, you know, half one foot in one door and one foot in the other door, it's going to be tough, and you're not going to be able to do that at the elite level that they're getting. And it might be okay, and you might have success if there were more related, like if I wanted to do weightlifting and powerlifting. Those two are both strength sports that I could get, you know, pretty good at both of them at the same time and be able to compete in both. But CrossFit and weightlifting are just there's too much of a difference in the amount of, you know, metabolic conditioning you need to be good at CrossFit, and the amount of strength you need, pure strength you need, and technique strength you need to be good at weightlifting. It's hard to maintain that, especially with the weight classes in weightlifting. And
I definitely feel like that's a controversial subject, because there are a lot of successful CrossFitters that do compete in Olympic weightlifting, mostly on the female side. And I know
only on the female side.
Only on the female side, yeah. And I mean, it is really unique situations for sure, but I mean, they're definitely strong girls.
They're strong, but they're not strong compared to weightlifters. Like, well, they're CrossFitters, and that's not taking anything away from of what they're doing, because it's awesome. But also, they're very, like, they don't have to worry about being in a weight class. They're lifting numbers that are comparable to their weight classes, and but a lot of that is when they're not in their weight classes.
Oh, like actually on weight.
Actually on weight in a meet.
And it goes back to what you were saying about you know, efficiency and movement and having that pressure. Like when you compete in CrossFit, you have many attempts. And if you miss one, it's not really the end of the world, and you have like all these warm-ups, and then you have 6 other workouts, you know, over the course of a weekend, where we have 6 lifts total, and it just puts a little bit more pressure on each specific lift. Like you have to be more precise. So maybe those girls, maybe what you're saying is that they're able to hit big numbers in training or in a circumstance within a CrossFit competition, but that's not necessarily comparable to doing that big lift in a weight class in a weightlifting competition, right?
Yeah, like I mean, the biggest example is Tia Toomey. She's won the games this past year and also went to the Olympics for Australia in the same year. No, the year before.
Same year.
No, she won 17. She went to the 2016 Olympics.
Oh, sorry.
In a very like basically a calendar year, she was able to do that. But that's not because she was the best, one of the best in the world at weightlifting, because she's not. We have plenty of people in America that are better weightlifters than her that would be able to fill a roster, and that's why she qualified for Australia, is because their depth at weightlifting is a little bit less. Well, not a little bit, it's less than America's. You know, we have a lot more girls competing at a higher level in weightlifting than Australia does. And every country needs to send somebody to the Olympics. And it's different. Like in CrossFit, we take the best from each region, and the regions are clumped together for a reason, because we want the best, you know, 40 in the world at the games. And we're still trying to figure out how to do that, because I don't think we have the best 40 in the world at the games even now. I think some regions, you know, obviously the kind of the Asia and some of those other regions that are a little weaker have historically sent athletes that aren't as good as the rest of the field, and some of the weaker regions have. It's getting better with like the super regions and how they're clumping them, and I think it's going to continue to get better. But in the Olympics, you know, they're still, you know.
Well, it's different because every country goes about like how much money that they're giving into each sport is different, and you know, the talent pool is different for every sport and every country, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not really that comparable, but
that's what I'm saying, is it's not comparable to say that, you know, a CrossFitter can compete, an elite CrossFitter can compete at the elite level of weightlifting.
Yeah, because then we could look at like the top 3 girls in each weight class at the Olympic Games and say, okay, like how is your total in comparison to these? Yeah, okay, I can see what you're saying there. So getting back to...
if you have any more questions on that, I'm happy to go further in detail.
Yeah, I'm not really excited about this conversation where it's going, so I'm going to change it.
This is what this is what people want to know.
We're not pointing fingers at people. This is about learning and for other people to learn.
This is about people that are, that don't understand what goes into making an Olympic team, for a country, and they don't know about the process. Just seeing something like, oh, look at that girl, and she also did this, and then being like, oh, they can do both. And it's like, well, you kind of have to look at the whole big picture of, the country they're competing for, their qualification process, where they placed at these events, and also kind of look at the whole big picture rather than kind of these broad generalizations.
Well, I think also you have to look at like what your priorities are, right? And you have to do that in any circumstance. So for you, for CrossFit, you have to think about your priorities as a whole. Like you're a husband, you're a dog puppy daddy,
I'm not a dog.
You're a brother, a son, and you have a job. Like you have all these different things that you're responsible for, and you have to make priorities within all of those things to what your goals are. And so you kind of have, some things kind of have to, go on the back burner. Like, oh, we can't go on vacation with you. Sorry, Mom. I have to train for the CrossFit Games. That's kind of where I was getting at with that. And when you're a multi-sport athlete, I guess one thing is always going to suffer a little bit. Like maybe Tia isn't giving everything that she could possibly be. Like she already won the CrossFit Games, but if she wasn't competing in weightlifting, maybe she would be even better than she is right now at, whatever else, because she could be spending more time doing more CrossFit stuff. Or vice versa, if she wasn't doing CrossFit, she could spend way more time getting her Olympic lifts better, and who knows how good she could be as a Olympic weightlifter, solely as an Olympic weightlifter.
My point was just that at an elite level, you need to choose one or the other, because they're both sports that require a lot of time, skill, dedication, and all of that. So you're really to be able to balance both of those at an elite level is almost impossible.
Okay, so let's talk about rituals going into an event that you have coming up. So let's use regionals for an example. Regionals is a high pressure competition for the most part, because you have to get a certain placement to be able to move on to the next step. It's not your end all goal. So how do you approach that mentally? Do you train your mind for that in advance, or do you change your training style in like your daily schedules? Like for example, I do know that you change your off days to more replicate, what a regionals weekend would look like. Go ahead and talk about that.
Like you're gonna want your practice to look as similar to the game day as possible. So changing the rest days to mimic those, and the training days to mimic those, and the styles and the amount of workouts you're doing, that all changes just so you get better and better at recovering through what you're going to see at regionals. And so it's all just about getting better with practice, and trying to get experience without actually having to take years and years.
Right. Well, so what does the mental training side look like for you?
I mean, it doesn't look like anything. It looks like me doing workouts fast.
Okay, so he's like a little bit more dialed in mentally.
It's definitely like, you need to mentally be able to control, what you're thinking about during workouts. You need to mentally be able to, know what you're doing and what your goals are, what your paces are, what, stuff hurts, everything, not just, joints and muscles, but also in the middle of workouts, they're painful, they hurt, and people are going to feel that, and some people are going to shy away. Some people are going to, push further into that, and that's kind of what our at a base level, what the sport is becoming is, how high is your pain tolerance and your ability to continually, do high skill movements.
Right. So, I mean, for me, I think that how I approach higher pressure competition would be a lot different than how you do, because it's not necessarily like, I mean, sometimes I guess it's painful, but that's kind of completely dependent on how my body is recovered. So for me, I do a lot of mental preparation, like visualization and journaling to monitor my self-talk, and I talk to a sports psychologist, and I do a lot of mental training like that. Like I wear a singlet on Saturdays when we practice up to openers or whatever it is. And I do a lot of like before bed practice what the whole meet is going to go through like in my head. Do you think that there's the difference of how you approach that versus how I approach it is just the nature of the differences between the two sports? Or do you think it's super personal? Like, do you think there's other CrossFitters that approach regionals more similar to how I approach nationals or worlds?
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of dependent on the person and what their background is in that and what their, all of that. So I think that it just goes into the, the difference between people and how they compete and, what they feel makes them the best athlete they can. That's what we're all doing is trying to do the things that make us better than the next person. And if you feel that makes you better than the next person, then that's something you're going to do. And if I feel like, there's something that makes me better than the next person, that's what I'm going to do. Me personally, I feel like I put a lot more energy into recovery than anything, because I feel like that's what's going to make me better than the next person, is being able to recover the best. And obviously the movements, all that other stuff plays a factor. Not talking about all that other stuff, but rather than focusing on that mental stuff that you focus on, I take those times to focus more on my recovery than anything else.
So while we're talking about recovery, what is the biggest mistake that you've made in the last couple of years within your recovery that you had to learn the hard way?
Probably nutrition, honestly, is such a big part of your recovery and how your body feels and how your body performs, nutrition and hydration. And it really takes, for me, it took having some not good performances, at regionals and at other events for me to really realize, okay, this is a big part of it and something that I need to focus more on. Because you do kind of see some people will post on social media, some athletes will post like, oh, this is my, look at my cheat meal, look at all these donuts I'm eating, look at this that I'm eating. And some people might see that and think, oh, these athletes are training hard and they're eating this, so I can do that too. But what you're not seeing also is, I might, have a cheat meal or have something like that every once in a while, but you don't see the thousands of other meals that I have eaten that were spot on and were, a much better nutrition profile than a box of donuts. That's going to be the outlier, whereas people see these outliers on, social media or interviews or, wherever they see them and they think that, oh, these are that's just how normal. These are and I mean, I think that obviously you guys work hard. So if you do feel like you need to have a cheat meal, just for, balance in your life and and enjoy your going out to eat or enjoy your birthday or whatever, like every once in a while being able to do that. But it goes back to priorities, right? Like if I want to make the Olympic team, like, is it really important for me to eat this bad every single day, or is it important for me to be the best athlete that I can be today and tomorrow and the next day and be able to recover from the hard trainings and everything? And that definitely goes into it. So yeah, that makes sense. So what do you think that the biggest breakthrough that you've had within weightlifting? I know you have a lot of cues that you think about and all of that. What do you think is the biggest thing that made a big difference in your training or movement? Anything in weightlifting?
Yeah, anything weightlifting related. Like, was it something someone said to you, like a new cue you'd never heard, or was it something that you just figured out on your own, or?
I think that I don't know, just increasing. I think probably, being in the back, in the corner with you and in in the back warm-up room with you, seeing your training sessions, seeing what goes into your competitions and your sessions and your lifts, and helping you has kind of been the biggest, because it just increases your weightlifting IQ. It increases, you know,
your
just
eye.
how.
Sorry, go on.
It increases, your eye. It increases your weightlifting. Yeah, it just increases, you know, what you feel during the lifts, what you see, you know, how you know, just increases your ability to diagnose what's going on in somebody else's or in your own lift, and get better from it.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of time and a lot of experience. And if you don't have either, you know, it's going to be hard. And I think I was able to get the time and experience you know, a little bit faster than most people because of the situation we're in.
Definitely. I think that can be brought back around too with experience and awareness of your lifts and your movements too. The more experience you have in anything, of course, if you're being present in it, you're going to learn a lot, and it can make you better, whether it's something that you're personally doing or I'm doing or Cody's doing or anybody else around you. So I think that that's an important lesson for other people to learn, that to be present in a training environment, if you have other people around you training, even if they're not the American record holder in their weight class, they still have lessons that they can teach you, and you have lessons that you can teach them. And I think that just being aware of the situations and being constantly open to learning and growing, and, you know, all of that is going to be beneficial in your growth. So I'm going to wrap it up here with this one last question. If a new weightlifter was watching this and wanted to advance in weightlifting, what would your advice be to them?
I think, just soaking up as much knowledge as you can with everything that you're doing. So whether that's watching, you know, one of your, you know, favorite weightlifters lifts, whether that's, you know, looking at your own movement, whether that's practicing your own movement, just finding ways to get better when you're not in the gym. A lot of people only focus on their weightlifting and getting better when they're in the gym. And there's tons of ways to do that at home, you know, when you're, you know, sitting on the couch or watching TV. You know, there's a lot of things, a lot of time in between your training sessions that a lot of people waste and just kind of throw away, that, you know, is valuable time to getting better at weightlifting. You know, so watch a lot of videos, watch a lot of breakdowns of videos from coaches and people that you trust, reliable sources. You know, you obviously don't want to be watching, you know, some people lift there are those outliers that they're lifting. They don't necessarily display the best habits, but that's because, you know, some people, you know, are outliers, and you're going to have those outliers. So find those people and those coaches and the people that you trust their expertise and their movement to kind of look at and learn from and mimic, and just don't waste time in between your sessions, I think.
Yeah, and I think
is a big thing.
I think I would say to ask questions, because somebody that's not as experienced might not see the difference between somebody who has, you know, less efficient, poor technique versus someone who has great technique, especially if they're both successful in the sport. Like, every athlete has some sort of bad habit that they've adapted to make work for them because of, you know, whatever the circumstance. But if you had a coach or, you know, an idol or somebody that you trusted within the sport that you could ask, you know, why do you do this? Why do you pull early with your arms? Why do you lean back so far in your pull? Or, you know, something that you might see or might not understand. If you ask a question, they'll most likely answer you, and you'll have a better understanding on why it works for their body type, or why a coach hasn't corrected that in the future or in the past. And then, like, why or why not you should try that.
Why or why not you should try that.
I mean, obviously, I have things that I do wrong that I I think that people watch and then think like, oh, it's okay because you know, it works better for me in my CrossFit workouts if I do it like that. And, you know, it's always cringing to me because it's like a habit that I'm trying to break all the time. But because of my limb lengths and how long I've been lifting and how long, you know, this motor pattern has, you know, been ingrained.
That's how you can tell how long a lifter's been lifting is the amount of arm bend they have. They're like rings on a tree.
That's not true.
The more arm bend, the longer they've been lifting.
Stop. Don't listen to that. He doesn't know. But for example, like I do have an early arm bend and people message me all the time about that. And I don't want them to think that it's okay to do that just because I do it necessarily. And that's just an example. But another point to that is also just kind of being open to new stuff. I think a lot of people think they find kind of like the holy grail or their answer or, you know, a good source of information, and then they pigeonhole themselves into that, and they're like, oh, this is the only way, and they end up not getting as good as they could get, or, you know, have the same development if they kind of stayed more open-minded and said, okay, this is a great way and this is working for me now, but this is definitely not the only way. And there are a lot of ways. So being kind of open-minded to other people's styles, other people's, you know, just there are other ways out there, and you're not going to find a one size fits all or the magic thing, and you might find something that works and that, you know, does a great job for you, and that's awesome, but don't limit yourself by thinking that that's the only thing out there. Yeah, there definitely is no magic pill, so you definitely have to try different programs and coaches and you know, technique styles and all of those things till you find, you know, what you're the most comfortable with and you find the most success in. But also remembering that, you know, weightlifting is one of those sports that take a long time to develop and to get better at, and you have to be patient and, you know, trust the process. Hours. Yeah. Christian's coach has this thing he always tells his new athletes, that you really don't become efficient in the lifts until you've put in 10,000 hours, which is the equivalent of how many reps? Like
a lot of reps.
Yeah. Just to basically,
I think that's a book thing though, like from like the Outliers book or something like that. Malcolm Gladwell is like, but
it just goes to show that, you know, weightlifting takes time to learn and get good at, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can point fingers and be like, oh, this coach isn't working for me or whatever. You should experience different types of coaches if you're still trying to see what fits. But once you find one and you like it, and then, you know, 2 years down the road, if you hit a plateau, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the programming. That might just mean that you need to change something in...
It's the coach. No. Go to Brute.
In your movements, or...
Your coach sucks. Go Brute.
Or it could just mean that you're, you know, passing your natural given potential, and you need to, you know, get a little bit crispier in the movements.
Get crispy.
Yeah. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Good luck with your training, and we will see you later.